Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming to the January meeting of the Northwestern Lehigh School Board. This time I ask you to join me in the opening exercises. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. With liberty and justice. Thank you. Please be seated. Stacy, will you please call the roll?
Sean Cassiano.
Here.
Willard Delaker.
Here.
Joseph Fatzinger.
Here.
Todd Hernandez.
Here.
Becky Height. Here. Lauren Hunsaker. Here. Todd Weiser.
Here.
Rachel Shepler.
Here.
Jennifer Cenobitis. Here.
Thank you. The starting item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. We do have an ad this evening. Go ahead.
I do. If you could, I draw your attention to item 2.02. We are asking for an exception for Act 65. We did have a teacher acceptance of a position we have currently open, a special education teacher in the middle school that we would like to accept tonight with your approval. The position is currently vacant, and due to the lack of subs and students in special education that need services in the middle school, we would like to have that approved tonight because we believe the person will be held by their current employment. And to expedite that, certainly if you are not comfortable with that, we could advertise the February workshop as an action meeting. It would be our recommendation for you to take action on that personnel action tonight, which is 2.02. Just wanted to draw your attention to the late ad. Thank you.
Okay, with that ad, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Weiser,
Second.
second by Mrs. Cenobitis. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. And at this time, I'd like to welcome all in our company this evening once again, and ask if there's anybody that would like to address the board at this time. We offer courtesy of floor at the beginning of the meeting and as well at the end of the meeting. So if anybody would like to address the board at this time, please rise and state your name and address. Not your address, your township that you live in. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sue McGorry, and I'm from Mobile Township. And I'd like to thank the board for your service and what you've been doing in these last few years, very challenging time in education. But I'm here this evening because we are concerned about the new matrix that you'll be discussing this evening, which eliminates metrics that have been developed by medical experts in terms of transmission and spread in communities and how it might impact our school community. Just a few things, issues that we'd like the board to consider. First is health equity. So with this proposed change or new matrix, does every student have the opportunity to access education safely? If not, are we willing to assume the liability for that as a district? Many schools in Bucks County are already experiencing closures due to illness and lack of staff. And I know that our goal is to keep our students in school 5 days a week. 70% of the schools in our area have universal or employ universal masking policies. And the medical doctors and experts at both St. Luke's and LVHN have recommended universal masking for students in order to keep our school communities safe. The Pennsylvania Department of Health metrics that were mentioned by Superintendent Pullman in the last meeting have been eliminated from the matrix. So we'd like the board to talk a little bit about that if possible. And also one question we'd like the board to address is whether or not the Northwestern Lehigh Advisory Board, the Medical Advisory Board, has reviewed those matrix or that matrix and endorsed it. Again, I thank you for the opportunity to provide some input and hope that there can be some good discussion about that matrix before approval this evening. Thank you.
Thank you for coming and thank you for your comments, and we will address these matrix later on in the meeting this evening. Is there anyone else that would like to address the board at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item in the agenda. And again, we will offer courtesy of floor at the end of the meeting as well. Next item is approval of the minutes. We have minutes in front of us from the reorganization meeting on December 8th, from the board meeting on December 8th, and for the workshop on January 5th. And I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Lizer.
Second.
Second by Dr. Hunsaker. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion carried. And at this time, we'll go to recognitions and presentations. And we have with us this evening Dr. Barbara Kistler, who is our representative to L-Tri-C. She hasn't been with us for a few months, and asked her to come be with us tonight and give a report on what's happening at L-Tri-C and give the new board members a chance to meet Barbara Kistler, Dr. Kistler, who is our representative at our college. So would you like to introduce Barbara?
I certainly will. I don't know that Mrs. Dr. Kistler requires much introduction. She is on your screen. She has been for a very long time our board representative at L-Tri-C as well as a professor at L-Tri-C. I think she has since retired. She is involved in many, many community projects. And so you might see her there as well, but I will turn it over to her for an L-Tri-C update. Dr. Kistler.
Thank you, Superintendent Holman and Mr. Delacour. It's a great pleasure to be here this evening, and I thank you for inviting me. And I'd just like to give a little brief report on what's going on at your community college, Lehigh-Carmody Community College. And as I've said in past messages to the board, it's just been a great privilege and an opportunity for me to both serve the Northwestern School District and to put my past knowledge and passion for the community college to good use. I'm going to have a few facts, just to kind of update you a little bit, but I do want to have time at the end in case you have questions that I can perhaps answer. First of all, the college is celebrating their 55th anniversary this year. Northwestern Lehigh School District was in the first batch of Lehigh County schools who helped establish the community college back in 1966. And I just noticed in a report I was reading that Carl D. Snyder was the first trustee representative from the school district. Last year, we served 13,000 students in our credit and non-credit courses. And just to break that down as far as Northwestern, in fall 2021, 120 students from Northwestern attended credit classes, and 159 more of your high school students took dual enrollment courses at L-Tri-C. Mr. Delacour asked me to say a few things about how we're managing COVID, which is always a big topic at our board meetings. And during the first months of COVID back in 2020, the college instructors had to do a complete pivot to all online learning, as many schools had to. But this was not such a huge adjustment for L-Tri-C, since most full-time people at L-Tri-C faculty are trained to do online teaching of adult learners. So when COVID abated some, the schedule was still very heavy with online courses, but there were still, this was in the fall of 2020, a few labs on hands-on kinds of things that were happening with very small census and distancing happening. As of this week, we're starting our spring 2022 semester, and it's about 50% online classes. So students have a real choice as to whether they want to come to a campus setting or whether they want to continue online. Now, since the beginning, LTRIC, I would say, has had a very conservative and comprehensive COVID plan. There is strict masking in all buildings, no exceptions. All CDC guidelines are being followed for the safety of all the adult learners. And as you know, when COVID began, we had to recognize that our students had great challenges in completing their educational goals as well as navigating the pandemic. So a fully functioning food pantry was begun at LTRIC, both at Schnecksville and at our Donnelly Center in downtown Allentown. We hired a basic needs and community resources specialist to help students with needs such as homelessness, childcare, transportation, purchasing books. And we also, this was very exciting to me, began a new program of student success coaches that help students with everything from navigating the college scene to like food insecurity. So these coaches have been a great help in keeping students in school. Fortunately, we received over 30 million federal stimulus dollars, with $11 million being given directly to our students. And I heard just 2 nights ago that over $1 million has been given to students in the past month or so that students can begin this spring semester this week. $3 million has been given to date for student scholarships totally. And you may have read in the paper that student debt of about 1,300 students was erased from that spring 2020 to fall 2021 semester. The money has also been used to purchase a new air circulation system for Science Hall to circulate clean air, and a lot of new software to keep students connected to the college, gathering data. 2 outdoor classrooms were built. We can't use them today, but those outdoor classrooms have been used in nicer weather. And we've had 2 groupings of classrooms now that we are getting back to more in-class settings with the latest technology. This will be happening this semester, being outfitted with brand new technology and distancing type of seating. One thing that I'd like to say about finances is the fact that for us at Northwestern Lehigh, this is the 9th year that the college has not increased the school district's contribution overall to the college, because we recognize the challenge faced by all the boards. And this year, Northwestern's contributions will actually be going down 0.7%, or almost $2,000. So not only is LTRIC recognized as a veteran-friendly institution, a veteran-serving institution, but we are also designated by the U.S. Department of Education as a Hispanic-serving institution, since we have a minimum of 25% Hispanic population. Another population of students are our Amazon students, over 300, oh, it's more like almost 400 students so far, representing states from coast to coast, have completed the Amazon Megatronics and Robotics Apprentice program starting in 2020 through now. We are nationally recognized for this, and students receive 12 weeks of training. They stay down at the, used to be the Holiday Inn in Fogelsville. It's now Marriott, I believe. But they're here for 12 weeks. They receive comprehensive lab and instruction, and the income from this training program has greatly assisted the college in moving forward. You'll read also in the paper that just about every month we have a new articulation agreement with another university. This month it was East Stroudsburg University, got a huge federal grant that also included the college so that students can start at LTRIC, get their tuition fully paid for, and then transfer seamlessly to East Stroudsburg in a STEM subject. So that's exciting for this month. So that I would say that while the college has certainly been challenged during this pandemic, just like any institution, I think our value has been even more appreciated. I'm thinking about students that I've been in contact who have gone to university somewhere else, but because of COVID, they had to come home. They thought they were losing out on a semester, but because of the agile scheduling we're able to give, they could make things up at the college and get back right on track with their goals and their educational futures. I'm also thinking of the programs that we've improved on because of the great need of COVID. We've doubled our nursing program size so that the great need for nurses will hopefully be met by many of our students. The other program that we've improved on in the past future is our aviation program. We purchased another classroom out there at the airport, and because there's such a need for pilots. And we also have our CDL program trying to get more truck drivers in our non-credit course. So that's just some of the news that I have from the community college, and I'd like to open it up for any questions or comments.
Thank you, Barb. That's a very comprehensive review of what's going on. You're still doing great things down there, sounds like. Are there any questions for Barb? Dr. Kissel from the board? Don? We had $30 million you got, huh? For COVID relief. Barb,
Excuse me?
you mentioned you got $30 million at LTRIC for COVID mitigation and program.
Yeah, in all those different acts, there's CARES and Carissa, and I don't know. They all have to, their own separate, as your business manager is well aware, they each have their own categories of what each, the kinds of dollars that can be spent where. And so we're trying to put this out to the students as much as we can.
Yeah, wow, I think you got what?
1.3, I believe.
1.3 million here at the school. So I suppose with all that money, you had some requirements for tracking and reporting on what you did with it and how it made things better.
Yes, still going on.
Yeah, and Amazon is up and running, it sounds like, the Amazon.
Amazon is cooking. It's really going well.
Good.
I do have a question for you, Dr. Kistler, on that $30 million. And obviously, if that money is going to offset tuition and that money is going back into the students, I know you said our liability as Northwestern, is going to drop a little bit this year. I guess my question would be, as you look out into the coming years and with that student liability, being paid for by the federal government, do you envision a reduction in the contribution made at the local level by the districts that support Tri-C?
I don't think so. Basically because of the way that the money is stipulated to be spent. And it will end. Believe me, they all have a deadline.
Mr. Lesser, it sounded like scholarships was how they were doing it. Dr. Kitzler, is that what you said that the
Scholarships, yep. Yep.
Yeah, I guess just a follow up on that, because it will end, I guess one of the concerns I would have if I was looking at it from our seat, right, as the folks that ultimately down the road are going to have to fund, the potential overhead, is how do we ensure that we aren't taking those dollars and putting them into programming that's going to actually increase our liability in the future? Like the overall budget for Tri-C, I believe, is somewhere around 55 million. But if some of these programs that are being created, you mentioned pilot program, et cetera, buying classrooms, all of that is additional overhead that at some point is going to have to be funded at the local level, I assume.
Well, the programs that I mentioned have all been going for some years. It's not like this is some new fad or flash in the pan, and I cannot really foresee there being a shortage in nurses or pilots or truck drivers for that matter. So, for
See if you
example,
don't have any bus drivers for us down there at your CDL.
exactly.
Yeah.
And Mr. Lesser, not to jump ahead, but 6.03, one of the questions we'll ask is, do you want representatives to come from those organizations? So that might also be, some of the things that Dr. Kistler mentioned, like the air ventilation, the scholarships, the distance learning, those will be what we would consider one-time expenses that won't have ongoing expenses, like the classroom at the airport, there might be some additional, I don't know if it's rental, et cetera, that might be ongoing. But I can certainly give them a heads up that we would like to know about how much is ongoing expenses versus one-time expenses of that 30 million, if that's where you're going.
Fair question. Yeah.
Any other questions for Dr. Kistler? Well, we really appreciate you joining us this evening, and maybe we can make this a quarterly thing, or as good news comes up, feel free to give us a call and get put on the agenda for Tri-C report.
Great. Thanks so much for having me again, and welcome to all the new members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Barb, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
We'll move on to, we do have some presentations. Recognition.
I do have a recognition. I will let this take the place of my board report tonight. At all of your seats, there is some items from each of our schools to recognize you. Little did you know that January is School Board Appreciation month. There is a document on your agenda that talks about little known facts about school board directors. And I know I've had some conversation with some of you already. It is much more than what you see in the current meeting where you sit here for a few hours and make decisions. There is much more preparation involved with what it is that you do in making those decisions every single month. And so in honor and commitment of the time school board directors volunteer their time on behalf of our school and our community, January is designated as School Director Recognition Month. The work of you as public officials is vital to the success of our students and our schools. School directors, as you know, are locally elected officials that devote hours and hours each month to the challenging and complex responsibilities of board business, including voting on budgets, which you will do tonight, adopting policy, conducting comprehensive planning. School boards also make key decisions that drive public education, which has only been made more challenging by the pandemic and related issues that affect the well-being of our students and our school community. School board service, as you know, is voluntary, and school directors are often motivated to pursue the role out of a desire to benefit their own community. They are our neighbors, local leaders, co-workers, parents, and friends. And as citizens and parents, the success of our school district is our collective interest, all of us together. This month, please set aside time to show your school directors appreciation for the time and effort that they put towards this goal all year long. Their efforts help to ensure that each student has the opportunity to thrive and that our public schools remain pathways to a very bright future for each student. So on behalf of the Northwestern Lee High School District, I'd like to thank Mr. Cassiano, Mr. Delaker, Mr. Fatzinger, Mr. Hernandez, Mrs. Height, Dr. Hunsicker, Mr. Leiser, Mrs. Scheffler, and Mrs. Senovitis for their time and dedication to strengthening our public education in our community. The information that you have at your seats from each of our schools, the posters that are tiger printed posters are from Northwestern Elementary. The picture and the thank you card is from Weisenberg. The mugs are from the high school, and the ornament and the thank you card are from the middle school. Although they tell me they are all collectively from all of our students and staff. So we try to give you some things to remember you can take home and remind you of exactly why you do spend the hours you do, not only around the table, which is what the public sees, but the hours of preparation that you do in research and reading emails and trying to make the very best decisions you can on the table. So thank you from me and from certainly our entire school community. And it is just January, but it is recognition for the entire year. So thank you.
Well, thank you for all of that, and please pass on our thankfulness to the I guess the principals the next time you meet, to all the schools, for the teachers and all the work that these kids done to recognize you. So thank you very much.
Try to give you some
Very
student-centered things to take with you.
Thank you. Okay, now we can move on to the personnel action. I do not have a report this evening, and heard the superintendent's report and personnel action. Mrs. Matiko, would you please take us through
I
that?
certainly will. Thank you, Mr. Delaker. Item 2.01 is our usual personnel items for your approval tonight. There's 34 items outlined on the 3 pages. I would like to call your attention to 2 retirements, number 1 and number 2. Retirement of 2 of our bus drivers. If you add the years together, it's 44 years of service transporting our students. So we are going to miss these 2 individuals and wish them well in their retirement. And I ask for your approval on these items tonight. I don't know if you want to take item 2.02 together with it, which was the add to the agenda.
We can do that, yes.
Okay.
Motion to approve these 2 items.
Motion to approve personnel 2.01 and the addition of a special ed teacher under 2.02 by
Second.
Mr. Reiser, second by Mr. Cassiano. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye? Opposed, no. Motion carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And moving on to curriculum and building issues, we have more discussion for the face covering tiered mitigation measures under 3.01. We did begin, well, we've been discussing this for years, but for 2 years, but last meeting we had a in-depth and pretty comprehensive discussion about the mitigation measures that we're using in our health and safety plan. And this evening, we're going to take a look at what the administration did with our suggestions and requests at the last meeting, and take a look at where we are now with the mitigation measures.
Certainly. I will start off. For those of you who were not here at the workshop meeting, that was an action item meeting, and we brought essentially 2 slides of recommendations. One which we rolled out immediately, which was changes to the quarantine recommendations, and one was a recommendation for our tiered face covering metric, as well as a recommendation for athletics for optional. As a result of that meeting, towards the end of a very lengthy, as Mr. Gallagher mentioned, conversation, the board directed us to go back with some of their feedback, and I asked it was it the will of the board to come back with something less focused on particularly the first 2 metrics were a topic of a lot of conversation, being the incident rate, which is the number of cases per 100,000, and the PCR, which was the second bullet on our old tiered matrix. Those two items were supposed to be on there for indicative of community spread. The board wanted at the time them to be continued to be tracked and reported to you, but not necessarily to be using them as a decision-making metric for face coverings. I would tell you also the vaccination status, we can put that on or not on. There was lots of questions at the time about the vaccination status and whether or not the reports that we had received, because they were older, from our teachers, as well as the fact that there was a recent change to what fully vaccinated in community meant. And so two of those metrics that we previously tracked, one, we're currently updating the one to staff, but the CDC hasn't updated, I would say, their definition of fully vaccinated. They haven't updated that percentage. It's still listed as the same percentage, which essentially means they're still looking at the 2 shots versus the booster. So that can go on certainly if someone would like that. What we came back to you with is a tiered, so I'm going to show you some examples. Some of you have asked for where would we sit today, and so the tier you see in front of you is the short version of what's on your board agenda, the recommendations that we made based on all of your feedback of having either less weight or just continuing to track them, but not allowing them to guide the decision, was to make the other two metrics bullets were the case counts in buildings and spontaneous classroom outbreaks. So the two that you see on the top there are the ones that we left on the matrix that would be the decision-making factors. On the actual chart, we do have on the top that we will also consider community vaccination rates, the incident rate, and the PCR. But the board, I belief out of that meeting, or the will of the board at the end of that meeting, was to consider them in either a lesser fashion or not use them as decision-making metrics. So the tiers that you see in front of you are the recommendation that's on your recommended for approval tonight. The things in orange are the places where we made changes. So the tiers remain the same in terms of tier 1, 2, and 3. We did make changes to the metrics. We heard some concern about, were the percentages right? I don't know. We did change it to 3% and above would count as universal. 1.5 to 2.9 would count as tier 2, and less than 1.5 would count as tier 1. We also, for ease of number of cases, put in the actual number of cases per building. Additionally, we made the change that we were recommending on the same slide to make it for extracurricular athletics and spectators optional across the board. So you'll see the two places that was changed. We did want to tell you exactly where we were in terms of the data in comparison on both charts. So the top of this page is essentially the matrix that is currently in existence today. We have for you, as you know, plotted the different metrics across all 5 of them to tell us where we are. And the bottom is the new metric, should you approve that tonight, where our current building case counts. Now, I would tell you, even since I gave you data this morning, we've gotten new cases, so there are a few more. But the top tier shows us that Lehigh County's most recent Friday report, which was last Friday, number per 100,000 is 2488. The PCR was 49.3, both putting them in the highest metric. The building case count at the time we were using more than 2.5%, and this is a rolling 14-day window, and I can explain what that means. We put the number of cases, so 3 of our buildings at our current data as of today would be in universal, with 1 being an optional, and then the vaccination status, which you see on the very bottom. The bottom of that chart is the newly proposed recommendation that's on your board agenda tonight after the workshop on January 5th. And so we did the same thing, plotted the cases, where they would be. So if you institute this and approve it this evening, we recommend whatever date you tell us, we will roll it out to parents and we will tell them what tier they were in. If that should be tonight, implementing it for tomorrow. The middle school would be in universal masking. The Northwestern Elementary and Weisenberg Elementary schools would be in targeted, and the high school would be in optional. We also have no buildings currently in community spread. Should you also approve the metric tonight, go to the last one, we would recommend updating the COVID tracker on the website. What's not really clear on our COVID tracker now is that 14-day rolling. So if you're only going to consider cases within buildings as your metric, it needs to be clear about how many cases in that rolling 14 days. Previously, we used to put them in by week, but the public can't tell when, I'm gonna say, they fall off. So if you think of a 14-day right now, our current 14 days is January 6th through January 14th. Tomorrow it will be January 17th, and it moves every single day. It is a rolling 14 days. So one day at the early time falls off and all those cases are removed, and it is the current cases for those 14 days. So we would recommend updating the tracker that's on the website instead of doing them by week to doing something like what's on your screen now. So you'll see the most recent updated date. You will see the buildings, you will see the enrollments in the buildings, you will see the active number of case counts in that 14 days, and you'll see the current percentage of enrollment. So at any time, it's kind of live cases. Now, depending on what time of the day you look at this, like this morning, this looked different than it does this afternoon by like 4 cases. And so this will always be live, as much as, Dr. Sosnovic gets the cases, confirms they are positive, and then updates the tracker. This will be what the live count is in the last 14 days, and the description of what is a 14-day rolling calendar period is on the bottom. And so we would propose changing the tracker to something like this if you were to pass the Metro tonight, since it is built on just that rolling 14-day case count in the buildings. And if you go back, Stacey, to the bar chart, one of the other things the board is very familiar with seeing is the case count by month. And so in January, currently, we've had 82 positive cases. That represents students and staff. And let me remind you, a positive case in a building is when they would have been in a building within their infectious period, which is 2 days, 48 hours prior, in either one of our buildings or one of our school activities, and they would be counted as positive. Staff or student, doesn't matter. So that is a chart that you see every single week, but in the January totals, and we've been tracking them by month. So I would certainly open it up for a conversation. As I said several times today, the board takes action in public meetings. And so we tried to take all of your feedback from last time and make something. If this is not what you desire, you can certainly direct us or have conversations about amendments, and we will be ready to roll with whatever it is that you want on whatever date it is that you would like to implement it. I will open it up to questions.
Phew. Well, drinking from fire hose.
Sorry, you heard it many times.
Yeah, I know. but
It's,
a lot of information.
It is a lot of information, but it is some of the same. You're just getting updates on what they look like.
So there's a lot of information here that we're looking at. Some information has changed from the last discussion we've had. And I think the first question Mrs. Holman put on the table was the idea of having the vaccination status as part of the metrics that we're looking at. And it's not included now, correct?
It is not.
But you do monitor it.
We will continue to monitor all of them, whether they're on the chart or not.
Right.
So yes, we continue to monitor it. What I would tell you, the 2 problems with vaccination status right now, as reported last month, is staff is completely optional in terms of their reporting status. So I don't know necessarily that is an accurate measure. And the Lehigh County community vaccination rate still depicts 69 or something %. Dr. Stone can tell me the exact percentage in Lehigh County. But that is prior to the December change, when the definition of fully vaccinated changed. So 2 of the metrics are in question about whether or not they're valid.
Well, even the vaccination status of the children is dependent on parents reporting that to the school, correct?
No, that's not correct. So if you remember last time, Dr. Snowick mentioned we can pull the student. Now it changes every day. So what it was yesterday might or might not be what it is today. But for students, we have a system that we can check that with. So students are accurate as of the day it was pulled.
But not the staff.
The staff are self-reported, yes.
Any idea, any thoughts about that? It still is something that you're tracking. And it's still something that could factor into a decision when we go from one mitigation measure to another, or from a higher to a lower, or lower to a higher, I suppose.
Excuse me, Bill. Correct me if I'm wrong, but
somebody could still be vaccinated and still get the virus.
That is actually.
So that would create, our numbers would still climb. And again, I mean, the only thing I have with the vaccination numbers is CDC still haven't come out with who's vaccinated by definition.
What is it? Is it a booster?
So
Is it
is it
two
a booster
boosters?
or not?
Well, they've come out with the definition, they haven't updated the percentage, so as
Okay.
of December 28th, they came out with the new definition for anyone over the age of 17, fully vaccinated, is the 2 of Moderna or Pfizer, or the 1 of J&J, and the booster. What they haven't done is the CDC site that, and the PADOH site that tells us how much percentage is fully vaccinated, continues to say, you know, that's right, 69, 71. 71% vaccinated, which is the same number it said before. So they haven't updated it to tell me how many now are fully vaccinated with the booster. That's the only thing I'm saying. We updated the definition, just not the data.
I would think that the vaccination data would be informative to the public, just so they can see what's going on in the school. Just for their information. I don't know, what do you think about that? Rather than keeping it off the table, but available, publicize that as part of the
Look, Bill,
communications.
what do we publicize? We don't have the data, so.
What we do for the kids. We have a percent
Yeah, we did.
status for the kids.
We publicized that as of whatever day our nurses pulled it out, and it was in the report that we delivered on January 5th. But unless we update that, it doesn't, that's what it is. It won't change unless we go through every single student and pull it again. If that's, it makes any sense. But we can publicize it. I mean, I have it. We have that slide from the last school board meeting about what our percentages by grade level are. I don't know that that makes a decision-making factor one way
That
or
was gonna be
another
my
to move.
question,
is
right?
my-
If we're going to publicize data that's not required to be publicized, we don't publicize every piece of data we have, right, on the health status of children. So if we're not gonna use it as a guiding factor, and that's the question, right, is do we want to use that as a guiding factor? If we do, then publicize it. If we don't, then I would say we don't.
Okay.
Share it.
The same as the cases per 100,000. Something we look at, but does it have to be publicized?
I don't know how you would make a decision on vaccine
I don't-
rate at this point. I don't.
Thing with the positivity rate, so those.
Well,
three-
I agree with you, right? The community positivity rate, I'm not sure, other than the trend, I think the comment I would have on these metrics is that if they're trending up, you know, then I would err on the side of either staying where you're at or, you know, moving up a tier. If they're trending down, then you feel comfortable sort of, you know, making a move. So, you know, to me, the trend is really important here, which is how I think those other guiding metrics start to come into play. It's like if the positivity, you know, case rate in the Lehigh Valley is dropping significantly, then you know, your decision and what you're doing at the school level is directed by that or guided by that.
Yeah, I mean, part of our reason for developing, you know, take criticism with the 5 metrics for what they are, is to try to grab a holistic viewpoint of where we are. The case counts are so variable, they're not predictive in nature. I mean, they are in the global that they're going in one direction or another, but your community transmission rate was supposed to be the predictive measure. And if you remember me saying in the last board meeting, that we trend about 2 weeks behind what the community transmission rates were going, and that's pretty consistent since this has started. And so you can't necessarily go, okay, the high school got a bunch of cases today and we're gonna do this, and then tomorrow they drop off and we're gonna do this. And you can't continue to kind of vacillate the kids back and forth just based on case count built, which is why we said, you know, make metric decisions, 2 weeks in a row. Even if you took it down to a week in a row, you will still see, I believe, buildings fluctuating pretty frequently with just using the case counts. So my question would be, yeah, what guiding metrics do you want to use? And then those are the ones you track, and then those are the ones you publish. I just don't, that's what we're trying to.
I do have a question on the case count, just so I understand how we're how we're tabulating. Obviously, there's been a big push over the last couple of days to get these, get everybody these at-home tests. If a student is not feeling well and they stay home, how do we get informed of a positive COVID case? And again, I'm assuming that there's going to be a dramatic change in the data when everybody has these kits at home. It means they're not going to be going in for, their free PCR test at their local health establishment, which is going to report that data. So
We're not currently getting this right now based on reportable data from a network. This, even currently, whether it's a PCR test and an antigen test or an at-home test, is self-reported by staff and parents. It could be any one of those three. I will tell you that if they get a network test, the doctor or the Department of Health will often give them quarantine rules or recommendations for them and their family members. But it's still somewhat dependent upon them to report those to us through COVID screening or through HR if they're a staff person. Yes, I agree with you. And, Dr. Hunsicker mentioned, I think last meeting, and more so as the availability came on Saturday of home tests, we will take a home test if someone tells us they're positive. We will not take a home test to remove you from quarantine, which has been the recommendation from the networks to continue to do so. So some of them can be home tests. So they would be counted in the number that somebody told us they had a home test, but wouldn't be counted in the Lehigh County case count for that week because they did it at home. So this could be over time with the introduction of home tests, a less reliable, more parent dependent or staff dependent metric.
Yeah,
So-
that's what I wanted to add. I'm sorry to interrupt you. But they, I believe, are recommending that if you get a positive on a home test, that you do not have to go get a PCR. So basically, they're very reliable that if they are positive, you have COVID. If they come back negative, that's when you could follow up with a PCR if you have symptoms, or if you were definitely exposed to a family member or someone else, to go get that PCR, because those are, more reliable for the like negative result.
I believe that's the recommendation of both networks currently. And, a network person described it to me sort of like a pregnancy test. Like when you take it, if you have existence, it's definitely positive, it's positive, but they're not as reliable in detecting it. You could get it negative on the other side. So they do recommend if you have a negative test, then to continue for your PCR. But networks, both of them, I believe, are not recommending if you have a positive home test you don't need to get a PCR test. Thank you, Dr. Hunsicker.
So it sounded like we're back to where we were 2 weeks ago with the vaccination, the cases and the positivity rate, as using them as guiding metrics, but not reported in our matrix numbers. You use them as a guiding as a guidance in your decision making based on the items that we have in the lower metric.
I don't know if that's where we are. I think I need some direction of what you want to do, because those two things say two different things. So, Stacey, can you scroll to the one where we have them plotted? So if you told me to use our metric that's currently in existence, everyone would likely stay in universal because the preponderance of evidence is in their universal. If you use the bottom one, my message will say the high school can return to optional, Northwestern and Weisenberg will go to targeted, and middle school will remain in universal. So depending on what metrics you direct me to use to make that decision, and I agree, and you have previously given me the authority to make the decision, I need to know what metrics you wish to use to do so.
Well,
Jen, can I just seek some clarity here, Jen? So in other words, if I'm hearing you correctly, if we would choose to stay in the top section, okay, with the, with the more highlighted yellow, that's basically not straying from the plan that we've been following for the last how many months? Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so my comment here is similar to what Todd Leiser just got done sharing a few minutes ago. I just have a really hard time supporting straying from the tiered mitigation plan that we've been following with the data points that we've been following for many, many months, given the trends of COVID cases continuing to go up. So I can't at this point feel good about supporting anything that would be different from what we've been following, that would clearly then have our elementary schools and high school students be unmasked at this point. So that's my opinion. And I'm not sure where this is going to go with the rest of the board tonight, but where I stand is that I want to continue to stray forward where we've been and, try to ride this out for another month or two until we get some recommendations from the health professionals that they're starting to see the peak. And then, trends are starting to head downward.
Just to clarify, Rachel, the unmasked would be just in the classrooms. After
Yes.
they've been brought to the school on the bus or the parents walking.
Yep.
through, they still have masks on, and when they're in the classrooms and classes begin, then they can take their masks off. When they go back out to the cafeteria or through the hallways, they would have to be put the masks back on.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, that would not be the case for the high school. The high school would be completely optional based on their numbers.
Okay, because they're in tier 1.
They're in tier one. But yes, you are correct based on what you just said, yes.
On the current proposed here, can you talk about why, if masking is good, K to 12, we would consider optional for extracurricular / athletics?
Sure. So the only people that currently are masked for athletics are really spectators, coaches. People that are involved in the active activity are not currently masked currently. That was always the place with the order. It was always the case regardless, that they, anytime they're involved in activities, and that could be playing basketball or wrestling, but it could be band or musicals as well. And so spectators becomes an issue with schools that have varying masking policies coming into the same facility. And I believe Mr. Zimmerman is on, and he can certainly talk about this, but the space we have, the fact that it's voluntary and it's parents coming to a voluntary event, and the management of that in a facility has become very difficult. And there's more than enough space at most events for people to spread apart if they choose not to sit next to someone in a close manner.
So I'm just asking because if we're gonna use the matrix and we're saying that masks are needed based on our data, then they're needed everywhere. So you can't say they work here, they don't work here. It's all or none, in my opinion, and I am one of 9. And so I wanted that clarification. You make a decision when you voluntarily step into one of our buildings to participate in one of our events. And so I do believe, if we're gonna do it, you do it all the way with masking, or we consider a different matrix at this time.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. That's certainly the board's decision. One of the recommendations was for spectators, extracurriculars and athletics. It's a slightly different scenario than in a classroom in a confined space, but if you wish to implement the same rules in terms of, uniformity, that's certainly the board's call.
So we were held with, and the conversation point throughout the last several weeks was that we are to model for our students what we wish to see from them. So that's my belief. If we're gonna model that for our kids, we need to be consistent.
I was at a wrestling match 2 weeks ago, and I got an email just a few minutes ago, people at the wrestling match saying about 20% of the people in the gymnasium are wearing masks. And I'm sure that's the same as basketball games, volleyball games, and any place else we have spectators. So when I was sitting there at the wrestling match, knowing it's a requirement with my mask on, sheepishly following the rules, feeling kind of foolish, who's going to go around and insist that everybody in that gymnasium, all the adults that come in and see that and walk by the signs that say mask required, who are the people that are going to go and enforce that requirement? How do we do that? It's impractical. I know we talked about optics last month or last meeting. The optics is what we're talking about. why do we require it in the classroom but not in the gymnasium? Well, there's also some practicality to this as well as optics. There was a recommendation on the table last week to make masks optional in the gymnasium for spectators. And we didn't take action on that. I think we voted it down. Didn't we? Just-
It was on the slide that did
And
not pass.
so that was carried through with the one we're looking at tonight to make it optional. But I just don't know how, from a practical standpoint, how we can make it required in the gymnasiums. Optics or no optics. Now, optics is one thing, but we don't go by optics, we go by what's practical and doable.
Well, and one important point, and I understand the optics, I understand because I am a strong believer in doing and modeling for kids what you would want them to do. I totally get both of those points, and certainly it's up for discussion what the board would like to do. But there is a large difference between something that's optional for participation or attendance at, and public school is not. And so you go back to, Dr. McGuire's comment earlier about equity for kids in a public school where kids have to be able to come to a safe place. It's not optional. You have to be able to create a safe environment for everyone, whereas athletics are slightly different in that it's optional for the students if the environment we introduce is not one for which a parent wishes for them to participate in, or a spectator coming. That is a choice. I understand the optics, I understand the modeling, and we certainly try to do that even every day to show our kids, but that was why we made the recommendation. And to Mr. Delacour's point, and like Mr. Zimmerman's probably on, he can mention this, like, it's just not a battle. Like, you want to battle with every single parent in front of their kids just to put the mask on, and not only then they come in with the mask on, but they pull it down, and then you're just a battle that we're putting our folks in the middle of, refereeing with parents with masks. So it was a selective practicality choice. If it's not one the board wants to entertain, we understand that as well.
I've been to a lot of basketball games this season here and at other schools. I don't recall seeing any issues where anybody was like, I'm not wearing that, I'm not putting it on to go into the gym. Everybody looks at what that school is recommending and follows those rules accordingly. I don't really see that it's been an issue to mask the spectators. And in the same regard, we can't tell these kids, oh, you're coming in to go play NYA basketball on Saturday. You don't have to wear a mask for that, but you have to wear it at school all week. Like, we really have to be consistent.
Well, remember, mask is only one of many mitigation measures that we have in the school. Mask is only one. We have separation, we have ventilation, we have ionization, we have distancing, or separation, distancing, same thing. But mask is not the end all for mitigation against COVID. And which mask are we gonna wear? Are we gonna wear the one that I had on last week and put in my cup holder and then put it on tonight? Or we're gonna use some mask that a mother made out of a t-shirt? Or we use KN95, whatever the recommended mask is today that people say they can't breathe through. It's
I think Dr.
so it's
Sustanek.
practicality. Oh, yeah.
Dr. Sustanek said Mr. Zimmerman raised his hand, I think. I can't see.
Yeah, Mr. Zimmerman has his hand up politely. He would like to just make a comment. Go ahead, Mr. Zimmerman.
Just wanted to help the board with this decision from the guy that's probably been at the most events out of anybody, really, whether it be basketball or wrestling. Listen, most folks are respectful. They give our ticket people and our law enforcement some issues coming in, but they have to at least wear it in. Once they get in the bleachers, it's so difficult to police. Majority of them just ignore it and throw it down. A lot of them wear like chin diapers, I call them. And some people are very respectful. It's a policy we cannot enforce. I don't have the manpower, and I'm not going to embarrass some kid and throw somebody out of the gym or stop the event. We are actually now in the minority of the gyms with who's requiring our spectators to mask. A lot of people have already changed. We talk about this on a bi-weekly basis with the athletic directors in the area, and we compare notes. So I can tell you we're all struggling with the same thing. So I was just at Notre Dame last night. They have strict masking. Believe it, I wouldn't have believed it if you would have took a picture of the crowd. So again, that's just the reality. We can speculate all we want. that's what is. And I just thought I'd share that with you all just to kind of help you through this process. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Jason. I have a follow-up question for you. I mean, I do believe that we should be consistent when it comes to spectators, kids sitting on the bench, coaches. But I would adamantly oppose making our kids, while they're exerting physical activity out on a court or while wrestling, wearing masks. That's just purely ridiculous, and I wouldn't support that.
Yeah, we don't do that anymore, Todd. Thank you for that. No, that was a thing last year. We got away from that and learned from it. That wasn't our policy. That's what was given to us by the governor at the time. So that got lifted. So we are not competing. Anytime you are engaged in physical activity, even when you're performing in our performing arts and band and chorus, the mask does not have to be on. So that's what we are going with. Todd, thank you.
And I'd like to add, what I'd still like to continue to see is the PCR rates and the incident rates. I think we've been doing that the whole time up to this point. I don't know how many, a year, 2 years, how long have we been doing this? Since the first time we shut down. I think it's an important, particularly the incident rates, an important number to see, because if Lehigh County is going up, I would assume here it's going to continue to go up too. If it goes down in Lehigh County, we're going to see the same trend.
Say we're 2 weeks behind.
But I will say this data, and I mean, I don't mind tracking it and trending it. I think it's a good idea to look at these numbers, but it is going to significantly change, because if you think through what's going to happen, just statistically, right? People are going to test positive at home with an instant test. They're not going to go in and get a positive test.
That's going to change.
Then they're going to go in and get a negative test, because that's what they have to do to return. So you're going to see the PCR rate dramatically decline, because you're pulling out a non-randomized group of people who are just testing at home now. So we're going to find a new normal in the PCR rate, and it is going to be lower. Mark my words. Once everybody's testing at home, we're going to see is a whole bunch of negative tests now, and that's sort of artificial, but that is what's going to happen.
I also think our numbers are probably higher than what we're thinking now, because we got people testing at home and they're not reporting it. So that's my opinion.
I just wanted to add that when I was referring to optics at the last meeting, I more so meant that if we were going to not make a decision and we were going to wait 2 weeks, that we should do it together so that we are consistent. After hearing the reasons that Mr. Zimmerman provided, that it's just it's practicality. I mean, although maybe I don't agree with it, you know, I can understand that and I can respect that. So I just wanted to clarify those comments. But I also was curious that what it ties into vaccination rate, the percentage of students that have tested positive and have recovered, because that is natural immunity and it's not through vaccination. And we at least know that that is a reliable source for about 90 days, possibly even longer, but they're using the 90-day marker. So, I mean, if vaccination rates in our elementary school look low, which they very much do, I'd be curious to see what is the percentage of elementary school students that tested positive that are now recovered.
Yeah, I don't know that. That would take a long time to figure out. It could be probably able to be figured out, but it would literally be going kid by kid and the dates that they were positive to try to figure out, were they a student that was counted in the vaccination? Oh, no, but they were positive. And then it's this rolling 90 days. So you are correct across the district. We have students that would be in the unvaccinated column that have within the last 90 days, and we use the same 90-day rule, developed COVID, recovered from COVID, and are in that natural immunity state. What percentage? I don't know that. But you are correct. They are there. If you want to comment on it, go up.
Jen, what numbers have to be hit in order for you to make a decision to close a school?
The numbers that we've been given by the Department of Health, and I put them on the slide last month because there's a couple qualifiers. It talks about 5% of a building, but it also talks about a phone call to Department of Health to get some guidance about whether or not contact tracing has been completed. Do we think there's spread within the building? I know they consider siblings, because obviously if there's two siblings in the same building or two family members in the same building. The numbers that we've been given by the Department of Health are 5%, which is why we set the threshold at 3, in the hopes that we would be able to implement universal masking before we would hit the 5. And the second metric that's on there, which we didn't talk about, is the outbreaks or community or classroom outbreaks or community simultaneous outbreaks within a classroom. The reason we put those on there is because those are the 2 bullet points Department of Health has given us in terms of closure, whether you have an outbreak or 5%, and the Department of Health will guide us. We have been hovering around 5% here and there at the middle school since end of last week. Couple cases drop off. You heard earlier today, we're at 4.87%. And so we have been in contact with the Department of Health a few times. They look at what numbers are going to drop off, and they also look at, on Monday, we had a closure day where there were not students in buildings for 3 consecutive days in the middle school. And so they consider all of that in making the recommendation. That's a long answer to say 5% or 3 or more in a classroom or an activity is their thresholds they've published to us.
But you mentioned that we might have four more additional cases, and if those 4 are at the middle school, that's going to put us over 5%.
Dr. Sosnowick can tell you where they are. They're not all in the middle school. We had 4 since this morning, I believe, added to.
And I'm just saying, we are 4 cases, 3 cases away from potentially having to close a building.
With masks on.
Up with that said as well, it's a rolling 14 days. And so there are students that are dropping off tomorrow. Approximately 12 students.
So more dropping off.
Correct.
That's the
So-
same, it's just again, the Lehigh County metrics. And if you look back at the positive cases, which would be your number one, you're at the top here, the Lehigh Valley, 100 cases per 100,000, right? So we're dropping off case counts right now. Day by day, they're in the 25 or 26,000 number. If you look at the last 4 days, we're down at the 7,000 numbers. So that number is trending down, and it's going to trend down pretty steeply here. Now, it's hard to say if it's going to continue to trend down because we only have 4 days in a row of declining numbers coming off the Martin Luther King weekend. But the positive sign is we are going to be dropping off some heavy days, even at some of those other metrics.
Dr. Sosnowick said he had your 90-day number. Go ahead.
So we track this pretty closely, and I'll use an approximate because I'm not going to throw an exact figure out there, but we had approximately 180 cases in the last 90 days. If you look at our student population in 1945, it's roughly about 9% of our students have that natural immunity that Dr. Hunziker pointed out. Obviously, there's a breakdown further than that, depending on what building they were and stuff like that. It would take me a few more minutes than just this quick number. Just to give you an idea, I would say it's approximately about 10% if we round up. But it was 9.45.
And Dr. Ms. Weiser, to answer your question, the number we have up there is last Friday, so it gets reported every Friday for those 2 metrics. It's difficult to anticipate because sometimes off a weekend when there wasn't, especially a Martin Luther King weekend where there were 3 subsequent days where there's less testing, whether or not what that will look like on Friday, I would just say. And so I don't know.
I think the important issue, getting back to what Joe brought up with the requirement to close a school building at 5%, is monitoring the cases in each building, like we're doing in that bottom tier, and showing that the high school is at 1.3% with a threshold of 5. Both elementary schools are at 2.7, 2.86, and middle school is up in the high 4s. So, we're approaching that recommendation, I guess it is, or that phone call that has to be made at 5% to possibly shut down the building. How long would that be for?
And it's not an automatic, like it doesn't hit 5% and they say recommend, but it says anywhere from a closure of 2 days to a maximum of 14 days. It says on the slide. So I think they consider all of that when they make their recommendation.
So with that goal in mind of the goal that we've always stated we have here to keep classrooms open 5 days a week in person, that decision point or that action point is at 5%. When we have to make the phone call and see what happens with closing the buildings and possibly going virtual as a result of the exceeding the 5% with all the tracking and the contact tracing and all that other stuff taken into consideration. But that's something we have control over. We don't have control over all these other things happening in Lehigh County and the vaccination rates that are up to the individual families. And I think that, why I liked where we were going tonight with this bottom set of tiers was to keep the decision local and make the decision for the health of the kids in the hands of the parents. We're not going to cure COVID. We're not going to stop new cases from occurring by wearing masks in our school. I don't think. Maybe that's a naive statement, but when you consider all of the other mitigation that we do in this building for cleaning and for air quality and filtration and ionization and separation and still requiring masking in the hallways and on the buses, this looked like some relief to me to try to get back to some sort of normalcy inside the classroom so we can continue educating our kids, seeing facial expressions and all the other things that we've heard that are detrimental to kids' education by wearing masks. So we're at a point now where we need to make a decision. The agenda item is to approve the recommended changes to the face covering, which is that bottom tier that's on the screen. And that would be the motion, and we need a motion and a second and then vote on it. And if we vote no, then I would recommend that we bring it back in 2 weeks at the workshop. And we have another feel for where the cases are trending and just keep hitting away at this every chance we have based on the numbers that are being accumulated in our database.
Mr. Delaker, before we go ahead and vote on that, Jen, do you have any data on the districts in the Lehigh County who are universal masking, who are close to the 5% threshold?
I don't, I can get that for you. And some of you asked for reporting measures for the districts that were optional last month. And I sent that to you, but I haven't looked at it, I would say, since the 5th to see what their percentages are.
Yeah, I'm just asking, I am aware of one district who is universal masking, who is up to 5%. Since this is my arena and I work in it every day, I am aware of that. And so, when you consider looking at things, and I agree with Mr. Delaker, some of what we are focusing on is our data, looking at where we're at, and making decisions that is best for our district. But I will share that there are districts on both ends that are universal masking and close to 5%, as well as mask optional and close to 5%. And so I think when we look at our data, we have to make decisions that are based on our data, where we're headed, where we're going. And I'm not sure today we can have that answer, but I guess that a vote will determine where we move from here.
I just would make a real quick comment. I can tell you in the beginning of the school year, when we had optional masking, and then of course our governor came in with his antics and came up with a mandate for all of us, and we were all pretty ticked about that across this table. I would assume so. I know I was, because we lost control, and he was lumping us in with Philadelphia and every other school district in Pennsylvania. At that point, I agreed to your recommendation. I have a problem right now because we're so high, and I don't see the numbers starting to drop off. And if Jen would have came in tonight and said, "Hey, we got numbers dropping off," I certainly would consider, changing our mask issue here. But I think the trend's still kind of climbing a little bit here, and it's tough to make that decision to make the mask optional at this point. Just my opinion on it. I would hope the board would think along those lines. I mean, our numbers are through the roof compared to what we were on our last meeting. What was that last week? Could you comment on that?
Which number are you talking about, the incident rate?
Yeah, the incident rate.
So the incident rate a couple weeks ago was 700 something when you met, then the following week, if you recall in the board report that I gave, it was 1,500 something, and now it is on the screen as 2488.
Yeah, county.
But that is Lehigh
That's-
County
I understand
numbers
that's
for
Lehigh,
incident rate. I don't know if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
So the motion on the table.
I guess my point was, excuse me, my point was, maybe we should push it off again a little bit, another week, till the next meeting, to see what these numbers do.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to clarify, because while we may vote one way or another on this lower part, and I'm actually for the lower part of this sheet, we're still saying that Jen has the ability based on the trends and the trajectory of all the other, this isn't a hard and fast number, right? If I was looking at all this data collected, I can tell you right now, I wouldn't move the high school to tier 1. I would probably keep my middle school, I would keep the middle school in tier 3, and I would have all the other schools in tier 2 right now. Just based on the fact that that high school number looks to be a bit of an outlier to me, and based on the other local data, I wouldn't have all of our schools at a different level. That would be my recommendation if I was making that decision. So we're giving Jen the ability to look at all this data and not a hard and fast rule. Like, that's how I'm understanding this. So what she decides will be based on her interpretation of the data. I guess if we want to get more specific about it, we have to vote that in and decide on that. But that, I mean, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what we're saying by voting in this or not voting in this tier structure, is that Jen still has to make the call based on all of the data she's looking at.
Is that accurate, Jen?
If you put that in the action, it's accurate. What I would tell you is that without guiding metrics that say that makes it a really difficult call. Because you will have full, just use out of last meeting, you'll have people say, they didn't give you the authority to do that, or that's not what I heard, and I heard him say that, and I heard her say that, and you did something different. And so you will always have that without defining what I'm supposed to use. That's the.
Along that lines, my question actually was going to be, if you come back to us in a week or two and all of the case numbers, percentages grow across the board, that we're making that phone call for the middle school, and now we're up over 3 at the elementary schools, what are we going to do at that point? Is it Jen's decision, or are we going to turn around and help out and make a new decision?
It's Jen's decision. You can make a decision on a daily basis. You don't have to wait 2 weeks to make a decision.
No, I don't. And in fact, if it was an outbreak, Joe, in the matrix, it says we would make the decision to pivot them. And one part of the plan that you did approve was to give me the authority to pivot to individual schools or individual districts based on all the information I know. What we recommended last meeting was to consider all 5 of those things in making the decision. And the information I got as a will of the board leaving this meeting was that you didn't really want me to weight the top 2. I'll say in the way we had been. So that's really where we need to hear from you. Because you didn't, I say as a board, as a whole, didn't want us to weight those top 2 in the same way we were, I think.
Can you just clarify? So previously we were using the 2.5% as kind of our threshold for masking. What was the reasoning for increasing
The
that?
3.
To 3.
Well, in that particular case, there was some conversation around the table, was 2.5 at the time ever going to be achievable? And was it better to move that, I think the words were closer to the 5%. And there's, like we said, there's a dangerous part of how do you make it so close that you put an action item in place that actually has an impact as an intervention versus a reaction. Like, so you could certainly keep it at 2.5. We tried to put it at a spot where we thought it had enough time to actually act as an intervention and make an impact and to avoid a closing. That's the whole point of it, was the whole point of it being in existence.
We've also looked at other schools that have implemented a similar strategy, which use very similar percentages in terms of their breakdown and structure.
And that's the same reason we changed it, if you recall, from a 10-day rolling to a 14-day rolling to match up with what the Department of Health was using as their 14-day rolling. I mean, it really can be whatever it is that you wanted to say. We heard some conversation at the last meeting that 2.5 is half of where you have to get to. So we thought making it a little higher. And it does make an impact, as you see, makes an impact with several buildings. So yes, I still have the authority is the answer, but I heard you don't want to weight the two things that are probably most heavily weighing this decision in the metrics. So that's where we need to know from you.
And that would be the top two bullets on the top part of the sheet we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, they're so far off the chart.
Can you pull up the, I was gonna say, you probably should pull up the actual thing we're voting on, because that's not. what
Yeah,
we're
that's
voting
all right. That's correct. We pulled the
That's
two
what
matrix
we're
from the
voting
board agenda. Okay, there. Well, and there's
Was
some
that-
words on the top there that are missing as
I
well
was
on the
gonna say
actual
there.
matrix on this, yeah. That are actually important, because you would also be voting on the spectator part, so you need to be in agreement whether you agree with that or don't, because that's also included on there. But if you are voting on this, I will take those into consideration, but the way the metrics were built before, they are so far off the chart, they were driving some of the decisions, and that's not necessarily what I heard you wanted out of
Right.
January.
And that's what I heard as well.
And so I will consider them, but we will primarily use whatever matrix you approve, and right now it will be driven minus any anomalies or spread in a building based on case counts. And that's what you need to decide if you're comfortable with.
See, my whole thing is though, if we're at 2.8 and almost 2.9 in both elementary schools, that's super close to 3%. So then if we're not weighting the other two categories, but we're taking it into consideration and the way that it's trending, then personally, I think it should stay in tier 3. Now, with that said, I don't think it's a matter of, us masking or not masking. I think it's more of a when. Because I mean, I think that it is going to go optional. I think it's just a matter of when. So pretty much I would feel more comfortable in making a decision to go optional in 2 weeks, because then I think we will see, and we won't be so close to that 3%, because the last thing I want to do is have to close schools and risk enclosures, and then we're putting burden on parents, and then the kids aren't in school, and that's the whole reason why we wanted a 5-day in-person school week. And I just think that that's really important. I think once we can get back to those numbers that we saw from August, September, October, you can maybe even argue November. I think that that's a much more favorable way to go, mask optional.
Can I propose or maybe this is a question, but could we not vote on this with an effective date of February 2nd? Doesn't have to be effective tomorrow.
Yes, so the two questions I will have, depending on what you do, is whatever it is, whether you keep it and you want to look at it, or you change it and you put it in place, will be an effective date, because we need to prepare communication and say effective whatever, this will go into place. And then whether or not you wish to make the spectator change, depending on which you decide with, whether that goes along with the recommendation or you wish to do something different for spectator. So both of those, I think, will be secondary questions depending on what it is that you decide. But yes, I mean, you asked that, I think, Todd, at the last meeting, you could always consider it in 2 weeks. So, you asked the same question last week, you can do that. You can consider it and make a date in the future that this will go into effect X date. Both of those are options.
This February 2nd, the workshop.
It's 2 weeks from now.
Is that the workshop?
It should be, right?
So the recommendation, the suggestion is to take a vote tonight to make this recommendation effective on February 2nd. And what do we do in the meantime with the sports, with the spectators? Can we
That's a
make
piece,
that optional as part of the motion?
you can do either, you can do whichever way you want, or you can consider, depending on the vote of the board, you can consider them as two completely separate motions to see what
Yeah,
happens,
let's
so.
do that. Let's do that.
If you are voting, then I would say that you are looking to make the tiered face covering matrix that's on the board agenda that includes case counts and simultaneous outbreaks. Effective February 2nd. Without third.
Well, what's the, meeting?
But that's not a voting meeting unless you advertise it. So if you're just putting it in place, you're acting tonight.
Right, so it doesn't have to be that date.
It doesn't have to be a voting meeting, but you
Yeah.
want to put it on a date that makes some kind of sense.
So if we get to the second and
Not
the
just a
numbers
regular
are high, we're still back where we are today. I mean, we're still in tier 3.
So can we make a motion to, I'm asking, I'm not making a motion, to in 2 weeks, review the data, and at that point, make a determination, and can we make it an action meeting, so if need be, we can take action at that point and look at the data at that point and determine, are we seeing a steady decline or some decline, to be able to then make a determination as to what matrix we should use moving forward.
Yes, you can do that. The second question I will have is about spectators after that, but yes, yeah. If that's the motion, you can need a first and a second.
Okay, we have two options on the table. One is as on the agenda to vote that up or down, or to, there are three options, I guess, or to make it effective February 2nd, or to table this and put it on the agenda for February 2nd workshop and advertise that as an action meeting.
I don't think you have to do anything. If you're not gonna do anything, I don't think you have to take an action, or vote on it.
But I think they're looking to look at the data and make a recommendation for the tiers, which Jen said it, Mrs. Senator said, I believe. So if they are changing to one of these two things, they would.
But are you implementing it? No, you're revisiting it in 2 weeks.
So let me ask this a different way then. So if this was to be effective February 2nd and we have a workshop meeting that evening, we can have an open public conversation on what is the current data and how might Jennifer be guided by that current data, right? We're not voting on it, but we can have an open public conversation about how to potentially enact the new at that day policy, correct? So if you're looking at us and saying, you know, these numbers are trending up and this is a decision I'm considering for tomorrow, you know, we can have that conversation in a public forum.
Yes, if you are giving guidance and I make the decision, you could enact this tonight. Tiers as they are on your board agenda, spectators, a separate issue. Effective February, well, 3rd or the day after. February 2nd in the evening, you would give me some guidance about, we can present what the data looks like that night and what tier we will be in effective tomorrow, which would be February 3rd.
Jen, can you explain to me what you meant in your note? So if you read the note on the page that's up.
Yes. That note has been in existence with the exception of the last line, Joe. So the note says each guiding metric will be considered when determining districts tiers. Individual schools or districts may transition between tiers. Movement will be considered after 2 subsequent or consecutive weeks. The only add is that last sentence, which I think is what the board wanted, that the district will consider community vaccination rates, incident rate, PCR positivity when deciding on the tier to move it off the chart, but continue to track and use it as a guide.
What do we mean by movement among the tiers will be considered after 2 consecutive weeks?
So minus an outbreak, before the order, we were going to do is every Friday the data comes out and we would make a decision. And we would do that for 2 subsequent weeks. So if I were to launch a message like I did on December 10th when the order went out and said, we are tier 3 effective tomorrow, we would look at the 2 subsequent weeks of data before we would move them, except if there was an outbreak, we would move them sooner. So I would have the authority to pivot or move them among the tiers, and we would try to keep buildings in their tier to not vacillate them back and forth for 2 weeks.
Okay, you just said I would have the authority, but earlier when you were discussing it, you said we. And I was just making sure that it was a you and not a we that does that 2 week.
I mean, when I say we, I didn't mean you. I meant we as an admin team, we as a cabinet team, not we as a board. Sorry.
Thank you. That's hence my earlier question about.
Can we confirm that we still have Joe?
He's still there. He might have just muted himself.
Joe, I don't know if you can hear me, but did you mute yourself?
Yeah, I did. I said hence my earlier question about the 2 weeks earlier, because you had mentioned we, and I knew there was always discussion that we could visit this every 2 weeks.
Yeah, both are true. The board can visit this at any board meeting they wish to. They can make decisions at board meetings that are advertised. I was saying we, meaning me. Ultimately, it is my decision, but I consult with certainly our team about what they're seeing in buildings and spread and cases and how many people do we have currently in process that are being tested. All of that to make decisions. What I was trying to say you have to give me some guidance on is, in one hand saying, well, I want you to consider those things. And I know they're extraordinarily high, but I want you to do this in terms of masking and kind of, if you don't give clearer guidance on what metrics you want me to consider, there will be both sides to the conversation or the decision or the accusation that I did or didn't do what you directed.
Got it. Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna cut to the chase on this one.
Take it.
I would like to make a motion to approve the face covering tiered mitigation measures matrix as presented, net of any mention of extracurricular athletics and spectators. So removing that row completely and in its entirety with an effective date of Thursday, February 3rd. That is my motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is the motion understood? Are there any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no?
No.
I heard two, I think I heard, let's have a roll call.
Yeah.
Okay. John Cassiano,
Aye.
Willard Delaker.
Yes,
Joseph Fatzinger,
Aye.
Todd Hernandez,
Yes.
Becky Height,
Yes.
Lauren Hunsicker,
No.
Todd Leiser,
Yes.
Rachel Scheffler,
No.
Jennifer Cenobitis.
Yes.
it's like 7-2. Okay, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Now, we have another item that we have to address, and that is the extracurricular athletics and spectators being optional. And I have a motion for that. And you can vote no if you make a motion.
I would like to make a motion that we include in our tiered mitigation measures matrix effective February 3rd, a line item that includes extracurricular athletics and spectators for indoor sports, where tier 1 would be optional, tier 2 would be targeted mitigation consistent with other measures, and tier 3 again would be universal mask coverings for extracurricular athletics and spectators, net of students that are participating in those extracurriculars.
I'll second that.
So what would be the masking on tier 2?
That would be targeted.
That doesn't really have a definition.
That would be optional.
Would it be optional?
You can make it recommended, so targeted doesn't really have a definition.
I would like to modify my motion for tier 2 extracurricular athletics and spectator indoors mitigation to be recommended in tier 2 and mandatory in tier 3 or universal.
Okay, is that clear now? It will be optional for tier 1, recommended for tier 2, and required for tier 3.
Second,
And we have a motion and a second. Are there any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Todd, for leading us through that. Really what we're doing here.
I think so. So just for clarity's sake, so everything on our current tiers, including athletics, will stay in place until February 3rd as existing. Including what is, I had to pull it up, I can't remember what it said. Currently for athletics, it's required indoors if they're in tier 2, universal for tier 3 will be in existence until we make the changes you recommended tonight and discuss them again on February 2nd. Yes.
I mean, we don't have to discuss them. It's completely optional.
That's
Okay.
not, it's not gonna help our situation in the gym for the next 2 weeks.
No, it's not. No, it's not. We will do our corrective. We would have liked this to go way January 5th.
Well, it's just from a practical,
Your mic's off.
for, just for practical reasons, I just don't, it's just uncomfortable for me as a policymaker, putting a policy in place to wear masks in the gym and going to sporting events and seeing 20% of the people wearing masks in the gym and the others are ignoring it. It just,
That's how a lot of us feel with our kids in the classroom with masking. So I do feel 2 weeks is not that long, We've just endured a long time. If you choose to come to one of our events, we had asked that you would adhere to it. I absolutely hate them. And as I mentioned last meeting, I am a minority at my place of employment. And so, I think we're getting there, but I think it's fair to the public that we take it across the board universally. My opinion.
okay, thank you for your comments. And I guess we're ready to move on.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. We've got some more things to cover tonight, and that is under policy. This is principles for governance and leadership. This is a policy we have that is recommended, and we do follow at the recommendation of the Pennsylvania School Board Association, and that is to follow the governance principles that are listed on the chart on the wall and listed in the policy that we have in front of us. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve that policy, and we will at a later date, if we do approve it, all sign it so we can post it in public. So I would entertain a motion for that.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Motion by Mr. Cassiano, second by Mr. Ratzinger.
Ratzinger.
Comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Then under first reading, we have two policies. Dr. Sisnovi,
No additional comments, sir.
no comments. This will be on the docket for us to review for the next 30 days, and moving into second reading and final approval. This is the 006 policy about meetings that has been clarified with all the changes coming from Harrisburg.
Yes, sir.
And I would entertain a motion to approve that policy.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Leiser, second by Mr. Cassiano. Comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. And operations, we have two items which we vetted at the workshop. One is for a new water softener. I think it was in Weissenberg.
That's correct.
And the other is for the Ironton SIP trunks that we discussed at the workshop. And I would entertain a motion to,
I just want to make one comment on the Ironton trunk. So it did finally get through legal review We're looking for authorization to move forward with it and Jess's final look at it. And I'm just asking Attorney Moore if that's correct in what I'm asking.
I actually think you can go ahead and approve it. We got the final draft. I just have to decide whether this truck changes or not, but it's fine. So you
Okay.
guys can just approve. You don't need my
But the one on the agenda is not the one that came back, because it came out today.
correct. It came back at
I know, I know, but
Yeah.
that's still okay. But the
So-
one that's on the agenda is not the one you're gonna approve. That's why I thought it needed to be pending solicitor approval.
Oh, all right. So we're pending system approval.
Motion to approve 5.01 and 5.02 pending the revised legal agreement.
Yeah. Mhm.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Senators. Comments or questions?
It's all right. Regardless, it's fine.
Okay. Legal is okay with this. Comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Thank you. And on the district finances, Act One resolution, we discussed last workshop, and we have the resolution in front of us that says we will not exceed Act One index by going for any waivers. So this was vetted at the workshop, and this means that we will stay below the 3.4% index in any tax increases to our property taxes, so that we can move ahead with the development of our budget. And I would entertain a motion to approve that resolution.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Weiser, second by Mr. Cassiano. Any comments or questions, or clarifications? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Student activity contracts. We also vetted at the workshop. And this was for the prom, I believe, the DJ at the prom. So let's, and this is all paid out of student activities fund. So I would entertain a motion to approve that.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Mrs. Height,
Second.
second by Dr. Hunziker. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. And now we have the next budget this is a budget presentation and a question about bringing the L-Tri-C and LCTI and the IU into our building. I'll leave it to you.
So at our February meeting, we'll be looking to approve the L-Tri-C budget, LCTI and IU budgets, as well as their most recent audit. So just curious if the board wants any representation from those groups to be present or give a presentation, or would you like a brief summary from myself?
In the past, we've always had a summary brought forward from the reps and our business manager, director.
Yeah, we just
And,
recognize that some of them are new and might or might not be comfortable with explaining the budget.
Yeah, and because we have three new board members, I thought maybe it would be a good time, like we did with with Dr. Hunsiker or Dr. Kistler this evening, to bring the representatives from L-Tri-C, LCTI, and the intermediate unit into the school so that you could meet the directors.
Typically in the past, the executive director / president and business administrator have been who comes to present the budget. Do you want it from all of those organizations, or like they each have separate budgets? So L-Tri-C, LCTI, and the IU all have separate budgets and separate teams that can come present them. I don't know if you want all of them to come.
Do you provide a summary in advance? So we will know what we're reading prior to, or are you just gonna present it at the next meeting?
You get all the paperwork that they would send for the budget, they put together a packet.
Yeah,
Can
normally we
summarize
get
that
the
packet.
full budget packet from each of these institutions so that we can look at it. And if there are any questions, we will have the directors or their representatives here to answer those questions. I thought it might be a good time to meet who these people are and have them meet the new board members in our school if we can arrange it.
Yeah, which, you want them from all of them?
I think it's worthwhile. I think you just have to really manage that agenda.
Yeah. Just keep it-
So how, okay, so how long do you want, I will give them time limits. How long do you want to hear from each one of them?
5 minutes.
You want a 5-minute budget,
5-minute presentation with 5-minute max of question.
5-minute presentation, 5-minute questions, now we're good, from each of them. I will put that out to you, as the executive director, president, and the business administrator. What do you want to do about Gorman? So Gorman is our audit. Do you wish for
Different
Ryan to do that, or do you want to hear from somebody in Gorman?
I mean, it's the first time that you're here that this audit will be coming through, right? So this is an important one for you.
Well, it was the audit from the previous years, so when I wasn't here. You know, I just got it the other day. Really, there's not much for them to come in and talk about, so I can give a brief overview unless you want to meet them and get the information from them.
Okay, so we'll do it for the schools and the IU, but not for the one.
So Ryan will do Gorman.
here.
And Mr. Delker asked they have to do the same meeting. They don't. For Gorman could be scheduled a separate meeting, but the IU budgets, they will look for action on February. So those would have to be pretty much in the same meeting because the process is they approve and then they go to your individual entities for approval.
And maybe we could put that at the beginning of the agenda under presentations, recognitions, so you don't have to sit here.
Sure. 5 minutes for presentation, 5 minutes for questions. We will tell them.
And it's a meet and greet.
It is. They'll be able to summarize, they'll be able to summarize their year-over-year operational, but then what it means in Northwestern, because they're all driven based on our usage of the services and usage of the programs that they offer. So they'll be able to do that.
Okay, next item is accepting the reports. We did talk about them at the workshop. Is there anything you'd like to add about the reports?
No, nothing further.
And I would entertain a motion to receive the reports.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Miser,
Second.
Second.
Senator Midas. Comments or questions? All those in favor, aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried. And the bills were reviewed and would entertain motion to enumerate those to whom we are in debt.
Motion to pay the bills.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Weiser, second by Dr. Hunsaker. Comments or questions? All those in favor, aye. Opposed, no. Motion
Mr.
carries.
Delaker, I have an abstention.
Okay, one abstention from Mrs. Seckler. Zephyr. Thank you. Moving on to enrollment report. Anything you'd like to mention about that?
I don't, it's in front of you. If you certainly have any questions, we check it monthly. And so it's not just, discrepantly different than previous months. If you have any questions, I'll certainly take them.
Questions on the enrollment report? Foundation report. Mrs. Stitzel, are you with us this evening?
I am, thank you. I do have a few things to report tonight. Number one is that the foundation was happy to receive $100,000 again from the Nutripoli Bank. They've received this for the last, I think, since they've been in existence. So we are forever grateful for Nutripoli Bank for still donating that $100,000 for EITC funding. Also, the foundation recently awarded $2,400 in teacher mini grants from round 1, and they are currently accepting applications from teachers now for round 2, and that goes until February 22nd. Thirdly, the foundation is looking for local businesses to sponsor 2022 events. So if anyone is interested in learning more about the program, they need to reach out to Amy Kinnan, who is their Director of Development, or visit the foundation's website. And lastly, we are excited to announce that in February, the foundation will be kicking off their Share the Love campaign. And this campaign will include a backpack mailing for all K-8 students, as well as a bunch of blasts on social media. Basically, the purpose is to build awareness about the foundation and the different projects that it funds for the district. And as part of the campaign, they're going to be holding an exciting fundraiser this year, which is going to be a raffle that we hope that all of the community can enjoy. I I was told that you need to think mouse ears. So that should be a nice hint for you as to what that would entail. But stay tuned and make sure that you're following the foundation on Facebook for the most up-to-date information on that.
Thank you, Mrs. Stitzel. Any comments, questions?
Mrs. Stitzel, can you repeat the contact info? You said it kind of quickly on if somebody wants to sponsor an event.
Sure. You need to contact Amy Kinnan, who is their Director of Development, or more easily just go to their website, nwlef.org, and you can find information there as well as her contact information directly.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mrs. Stitzel. And again, once again, New Tripoli Bank came to the aid of their community with that donation once again. And I just asked Mrs. Holman if we could ask some representative from the bank, either Dave or John, to come and meet the board and talk about all of the services that we get from the bank and how they have helped us through decades and decades of this school's existence in our financing and in support of this foundation. We're very blessed to have them as our local banker. Thank you. Next item are committee reports from LCTI. Joe?
Nothing at this time.
Nothing. Mrs. Senavides from the IU, new member, new representative.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of meeting today to have my orientation. The meeting is scheduled for the 26th of January. I've worked in the Lehigh County in education for almost 15 years. I had no idea what they did. I mean, I knew what they did, but all of the things that they do. And, you know, managing 36 budgets to all kinds of things. I really had no idea, and the expansive services that they provide to our kids throughout the Lehigh and Carbon County. So it was quite an education. I can't thank them enough for what they provided me today.
Thank you. Hope you enjoy your time on the IU board.
Yeah.
It's good group of people, and it's good to network with the rest of the school districts in the area. It's always valuable for a board member. And lastly, recognition. Don Hernandez.
Nothing to report. We didn't have a meeting in December. Next scheduled meeting is next week.
Okay. Thank you. Nothing on the agenda for old business. Is there any old business from the board? Hearing on, we'll move into new business. It looks like we have a donation of hand sanitizer from 8 Oaks Distillery that we need to take action to accept.
I don't have anything further besides the owner of 8 Oaks reached out to many school districts. We were one of them, I believe, that accepted the donation. They were very helpful in, you know, kind of turning their operation upside down when COVID happened, and had extra hand sanitizer that they were willing to donate. And I believe we took a pallet of it. And so you just need to accept the donation. I'll have a value for it.
Okay, another benefit we have here with community support from one of our local businesses at 8 Oaks, and we thank them for that. And I would entertain a motion to accept that donation.
Motion to accept the donation of the hand sanitizer.
Motion by Dr. Hunsicker,
Second.
second by Mrs. Height. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Once again, we offer courtesy the floor to anyone who would like to address the board this evening. And if you would like to stand, please stand and state your name and the township that you live in. Yes, sir.
Jonathan Wozniak, Lowell Township. I just wanted to thank the board over the past couple of weeks for the lengthy discussion over the tiered face masking. Happy to see we're moving in a direction where we're really going to focus on our own backyard and have a little bit less of a focus on what's going on in all the far corners of the county. The only part that I want to share is a frustration. I know it's not one you're completely in control of, but I hear and completely understand this 5% positivity that makes a conversation happen with the state. And it's my analogy, it's maybe not the best one, but I look at it and I think if my kid takes a 100-question quiz and each question counts as 1 point, and they come home and they show me that they scored a 95 or a 96, ecstatic. But with the way that this is set up, it's almost like the answer instead to the kid would be, well, that's great, but it's not good enough. And then, you know, when we talk about the 3%, the 2%, the 1%, it's frustrating to have to deal with that, because when I think about the success rate, not the hit rate, which is the negative number, to know that, you know, 95, 96, 97, 98, those are all A's. My kid would be coming home with A's. And the answer is it's not good enough, or we have to do more. And, you know, this is what the more is, whether you believe it does anything or not. So again, I know you're not in control of that. It's, I'm glad to see that we kind of boiled the metrics down to what we have to. I wish it wasn't one. But again, it's frustrating, but I know you're limited in what you can do with it. That's all.
Thank you for your comment. Thank you for commenting with us this evening. Anyone else would like to address the board? Yes, ma'am.
Kate Weedig, and I'm in Lynn Township. I just have a quick question with the data. I kept hearing the word, the PCR, which I know is the standard which we use. I do have a question as far as them continuing to use that, because on the CDC list, it says that test has trouble determining between the COVID and influenza, and it says right there on the CDC to switch to a multiplex method. Do we know if our local, where we're gathering that data from, are they switching, or are we still using that PCR?
PCR is used in two different terms. The PCR that we're talking about is the percent positivity. The PCR you were talking about is the type of test used.
Okay.
So two different things that have the same acronym.
Okay.
So the PCR that's on the chart is the percent positivity, meaning what percent of people who walk in to get a COVID test become positive. There are multiple different tests. You've heard us talk about home tests, you heard us talk about antigen tests, you heard us talk about rapid tests and PCR tests. PCR is one of the more valid measures in terms of test reliability. That was what Dr. Hunsicker was mentioning earlier in terms of the reliability of the test itself. The PCR that's on the metric is the percent positivity across all of those tests. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess my question was just simply going off of what that CDC had said, to move away from the one test that can't tell the difference between the COVID and the influenza. Are our numbers reflecting people who have the flu lumped in with the COVID? That's essentially what I was asking.
All of our test results are positive COVID tests. We have received students and staff that have tested positive for both. But our tests that we have that are counted as cases are positive COVID cases, positive test results.
Thank you. And, anybody else like to address the board at this time? Yes, sir.
This is Brian Vogel, Untitled Township. I know you've been beating this down for ever and a day, week after week. So where we should be wearing masks, where we shouldn't be wearing masks, where it's helping, where it's not. Some people think it's great, some people say it's not, whatever. We can beat that down all day. But fact is, you've been dealing with this for 2 years now. We've got everything from shut the world down to put barriers up to wear a mask. 2 years later, this is not stopping any virus anywhere. I just spent a couple hours going over it down Main Street with the gym. My first grader do their musical. And although that stuff is great, and although it's nobody else's concern, I work third shift. I gotta leave here in like a minute. I slept probably 9 hours this week. But I'll get up and I'll go over there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I want to see that stuff. But to see them little kids with a mask on, they're small. They're muffled to begin with. They're really shy. You have this great thing that everybody sit up and you can't hear them anyway. Like, I know we're doing what we can, but this is this is not fixing the problem. So whether it's, we can't control it outside of these grounds, so what does it matter if you got a football game going on, nobody's wearing them anyway? Nobody's going anywhere else, haven't stopped it yet, so I don't think it's going to. So,
Thank you, Mr. Conkle. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, thank you for coming and sitting with us this evening, 2 hours of the board meeting. We appreciate the community support, the community participation from all of you. Are there any communications, Mr. Secretary?
No, sir.
And we'll move into administrative sharing.
Mrs. Pullen?
Hi, good evening. I just wanted to share that we had our first grade singing in the snow performance today. The kids did a fantastic job. We're very proud of them. And just thank you to all of the board members for your service. Have a good evening.
Mr. Gittler?
Good evening, members of the board, administrative staff, and members of the public that are joining live in the boardroom there, and anybody online. First off, I'd just like to formally offer my congratulations and welcome to the newest board members. Appreciate the public service that you're embarking on, and look forward to working with you in the future. Also, during Board Appreciation Month, I'd like to expand that to all the board members for your continued dedication to public education. And as we move through this together as a team, I do feel confident administering the wishes of the board in the high school, and I'm hopeful to continue to do so. Just some updates from the high school. We had Keystone winter testing, the session completed. We tested approximately 90 students in both algebra, biology, and literacy. And those students did very well in the testing environment. And speaking with some students, both before and after the test, they felt very prepared to take those Keystone exams. So with that wrapping up then, we'll move into the second semester here, and we'll once again in May take the spring session of the Keystone exams, as the Pennsylvania Department of Education has once again made those mandatory testing for our students. That's it for me this evening. Thank you.
Mrs. Stitzel?
I have nothing further this evening. Thank you.
Mrs. Verlet?
Good evening. I just want to thank you all for your service. I hope you enjoy the gifts that were presented to you this evening, and our Weisenberg Elementary Singing in the Snow program will be held next Wednesday, February 26th. So we hope you can join.
Mr. Zimmerman?
Thank you, Dr. Sosnovic. Not too much to report here. Just wanted to share that Northwestern Lehigh has the privilege of hosting the county band concert. Mrs. Klein is doing a fantastic job organizing that. That includes a lot of rehearsals held in our auditorium with a concert, culminating with a concert on February 19th, which includes a lot of the area schools. She's been working with Mr. Munimer too, as he's knee deep in spring rehearsals for the spring musical. So it's nice to have those two folks working side by side and making things happen for our kids. Happy to report in a couple of weeks our winter season ends. Matter of fact, February 3rd is the last regular season contest, and then hopefully some of our teams will head into the postseason, where wrestling will have their individual tournaments, and we'll see if girls basketball, I believe, has already qualified, and we'll see how the boys basketball. That's all I have to report. Thank you.
Mrs. Edmonds? Mrs. Edmonds, you are muted, but it doesn't. I'm going to ad lib for you and just say that you said congratulations on the recognition of board. Mrs. Stauffenberg?
I'll echo Mrs. Edmonds' statement. No, I just want to welcome all the new board members and to all board members, thank you for your service and thank you for your support to our students and our staff and our community. So thank you.
Mrs. Edmonds did just confirm that I got her message.
I just saw it, but
Mrs. Yadish.
Good evening. I just want to as well pass along my thanks to you all as board members for the time and service you give to the students of this school district. It's an exciting time this week at the high school as we transition from our first semester into our second semester. We hope to finish up our final exams, final assessments for the first semester tomorrow and start our second semester on Monday. So congratulations to all the students and staff of the high school for making it through the first half of their year, and good luck on starting their classes on Monday. Thank you.
I'm thinking she's not getting her wish, but we'll see.
Mrs. McKee, it's to you.
I just can't believe half the year's over. I'm sure half the year's over, but I wanted to say thank you to all our board members for your time and your commitment. And to both our students and our staff. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you to our board. Well,
I'll just echo what everybody else said. Thank you to our board for all the time you put in. I'm seeing more of you upcoming and we look forward to it. So thank you.
That, Officer Bronson.
Welcome new board members.
Welcome. Nothing further.
Just lastly, I kind of just teased about tomorrow, but tomorrow's weather is going to be at a lovely time. And so I teased Mr. Jadish talking about finals tomorrow, and we will do our best if we can get in to do that. But I know that the weather's going to come at the most inopportune time. So, and we're going to be doing it off the forecast, which is always fun because I do not have a meteorology degree, despite what some of our parents might think, and not even the meteorologists can get it right. So we'll see what it looks like tomorrow morning in terms of timing. And whether or not we can do a regular start or a delay or a potential for a flexible instructional day, which Mrs. Jadish is prepared for, but certainly throws her previously mentioned plan a little bit off. And lastly, thank you for your good conversation. I mean, Dr. Snowick and I look at this data regularly. We are just trying to, when we look at it, follow the metrics that it is that you want us to use to guide the decision. And with it being such a divisive decision, everyone will hear what they want out of each of your comments and make a summary about whether or not we are following what it is that you want. I mean, even tonight, and talked about what Mr. Monsiak mentioned, the focus on local data is what you wanted, and that's why we brought you back what we brought you back. But if you want us to consider those other things, that's where we need guidance from you. We're fully capable of making decisions, even ones that are unpopular, but need some guiding metrics of how you want us to administer programs and opportunities like this if it's not something that you want. So thank you for the healthy conversation about what you would like us to use so we can make those metrics, because there will always be people that will get that message and go, I don't have any idea how she came up with that. And they just have to trust that there's some other data that we know about cases pending or cases going in one direction or another, and we believe it's the best thing to do. And so sometimes that will be clear and it will be apparent based on the data when February 3rd comes, and there will be times where you're not quite going to understand, but it might be we know cases are pending, or we know spread in buildings, or we know so many particular case counts in grades or in classrooms that could potentially dictate that decision. And so I just ask you for that leniency when we look at that. You got to trust that we're making the best decisions for the right reasons. So thank you.
Todd Hernandez.
Nothing further tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Weiser.
Just thank you for the thank yous. Seems a little bit weird and circular, and now we might get a thank you back for the thank yous. And again, thanks to the New Chipotle Bank for their continued support of the Educational Foundation. That money goes a long way in supporting our budget here and some of the activities throughout the school. Hardware that we've acquired over the last couple of years. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. Mrs. Scheffler.
No comments. Thank you.
Dr. Hunziker.
I got to go to the Singing in the Snow today. And I just wanted to say a special thank you to Mrs. Crum and also Mrs. Hamlin. They put on a really nice musical program today, and the kids were all really excited. So I really enjoyed going to it, and also the teachers that helped out. Another thing, on Sunday, I got to go to the Phantoms game, where our boys cross country, our girls soccer, and our boys soccer got to go out on the ice and be recognized for their sports accomplishments. It was a really nice event, and I hope that they do it again. With that said, I hope my kids are hoping for a fit day tomorrow.
Duly noted, Tara. You informed the powers that be.
They came home and they're like, "We're gonna have a fit day tomorrow."
Well, because we sent computers, I'm sure that they think that's.
I have to share, Mr. Delacour, when we first got into this, said to me, are you ready for the countless hours and the time you're gonna put into it? And I was like, oh, what's a couple of meetings, right? Sadly mistaken. Every email from the community, every email from someone that is employed here, that is sent to us, I read, and I will admit, I don't know what half the stuff is, the data, because I just don't. So I go and I research it. And so I thank you for those, the feedback, the comments, the perspectives. It is helpful, I think, to educate myself more. I think I have a better idea that I am in this for more than just a couple of meetings. And also a thanks goes out to Mrs. Holman. I ask a lot of questions, give a lot of feedback. I think it's already well known and pretty vocal. So I do appreciate that. I appreciate your honesty and your willingness to kind of educate and share your knowledge. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. You've been extremely welcoming. And it is nice to be part of something and to give back to our community. And so thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Height.
I just wanted to say thank you to all the parents that reached out prior to the meeting. All the emails were passionate, but always ended with a kind word. So.
I was told the same thing when I first by Mr. Delacour. You only got one meeting to go to once I come back. That's not true. Anyway, I wanted to thank the students for the wonderful gifts. We get them every year. It's great to see it. I know Mr. Lizer and I can definitely use a bigger coffee mug. Yep. And also thank the Tripoli Bank for the wonderful donation. I appreciate that they never forget about us. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fetzinger.
I'd just like to thank all of the board members for the discussions and the ongoing thoughts that we're putting into this. It's very important to all of us in our own ways to understand that we all have opinions and we're all thinking about it more than just during a meeting. And I really appreciate the rest of the board members. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor.
I have nothing, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Foley and Mrs. Bartlett for bringing all the kids' work here to thank us for being on the school board. It's always appreciated, and they're very cute, and we enjoy them. Yeah, I agree with all the emails that we get on one side or the other, both sides of any issue. And this is just one that we're going through now with the masking, but there are many. But the knowledge and the experience that and the wisdom that we hear from our community members in those emails is valuable. And there is a lot of knowledge out there and a lot of wisdom, and we do appreciate hearing from members of the community and helping us make our decisions here. And for the board, thank you for your sense of humor as we work through these hard issues. We can still have a couple of laughs during these meetings, and we'll move on and try to make things better, and as we always have. And thank you for all the time and effort and the experience that you bring to these meetings. And with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
No move.
Motion by Mr. Cassiano, second by
Second.
Mr. Lizer. Meeting adjourned. Thanks for coming. If I don't-